Hello dear learner, I welcome you to the lecture 5 of week 2 and Theodore Adorno is the topic of today's lecture. So in this lecture we will study some of the ideas or his political philosophy as a critical theorist. First is we will study the critique of enlightenment. Second, we will study about his idea of negative dialectic, then human suffering and damaged life, then Adorno on Hegel, influences of Nietzsche, then his views on identity thinking and what was his critique of nihilism, and finally, we will understand his critique of culture industry. So, as we know that in the lecture 4, we have already discussed about Theodore Adorno, his life and background and some of the important ideas as a critical theorist. In that, we have ended by understanding his notion of enlightenment. And now, we are going to study in this lecture some of his important critiques of enlightenment tradition. Now, long before postmodernism became fashionable, Adorno and Horkheimer wrote one of the most searching critique of modernity to have emerged amongst progressive European intellectuals. Dialectic of enlightenment is a product of their wartime exile. So, therefore, we have already seen in our previous lecture, and it is very much true, that it is one of the most searching critique of modernity which has been written at that time, and it was considered as a precursor to postmodernity. And we know that at that time even the notion postmodernism was not known to us. At that time he wrote about the critique of modernity. So, dialectic of enlightenment is a product of their wartime exile. Now, this book, that is Dialectic of Enlightenment, it opens with a grim assessment of the modern West. And I would like to quote, "Enlightenment understood in the widest sense as the advance of thought has always aimed at liberating human beings from fear or installing them as masters." So, therefore, we can understand that on the one hand it is considered as a force of liberation, and on the other hand it is installing them as masters. So, that actually elucidates the basic philosophy or idea of enlightenment. Now, one of the important critique of enlightenment has been that nature can be understood through scientific theories. So, it was believed that the rationality which was actually developed with the help of various scientific theories can be used to understand the so called working of nature, and not only for understanding the working of nature, but also for understanding how we can dominate the nature. Now, he further argued that there is no transcendental subject and everything can be understood and everything cannot be understood in relation to the whole. So, we have to understand that there is no transcendental subject, there is no universal here subject which can be understood, and everything has to be understood as part of the contingent or particular situation in which one is placed. So, everything cannot be understood in relation to the whole. So, nature cannot be separated from history because they both are intimately connected with each other, because meanings are embedded in finite historical circumstances. So, we must remember that our existence is embedded in nature. Even if we want to understand nature, we have to connect it with other dimensions, and one of the dimension is history, and meanings are embedded in finite historical circumstances. So, there is no universal laws or universal theories which can be applied across all the circumstances without taking into consideration the various types of diversities which are present in the different societies. Now, what we mean by the concept of the negative dialectics. Now, we know that he has borrowed the idea of dialectics from Hegel. but argued that the dialectic cannot be a positive process, because Hegel understood it as a positive process through which the progress of society will take place, or the history will progress, or historical evolution will take place. But Adorno argued that no, the process of dialectic need not be always positive, it can have the negative consequences also. And this is illustrated by the fact that how so called the process of thesis, antithesis and synthesis have led to the transformation of not a type of society which is of higher ideals or which is of a much developed nature, but it has led to transformation of a type of society which has been very destructive and which has caused so much of destruction. He rejected Kantian division of nominal and phenomenal world. Now, Kant made a division of nominal and phenomenal world. Now, we must know what we mean by nominal and what we mean by the word phenomenal. According to Kant, nominal world is the world that the intellect thinks about, and phenomenal world is a world that we experience through our senses. It is basically a type of distinction between object and subject. So, he has, or Adorno has rejected the Kantian division between the subject and the object, which has been a part of the Enlightenment tradition also. Instead, he advocated for the unity of object and subject, because we cannot separate them, they are connected with each other. In fact, we know that we have already studied the important features of critical theory, and in that we have studied that they talk of interlinkages between theory and practice. They have talked of interlinkages between philosophy and social science, and also connecting fact with values. So, therefore, we have to understand that the unity of object and subject has been an important concern, or it has been an important point which has been stressed upon by Adorno. Now, the subject is constituted by social relations and diversities. There is need to recognize that the so called capitalist society imposes an unity over subjects, thereby suppressing all diversities. Now, we all are the subjects and we are constituted by diversities, and this we must recognize. But unfortunately, the so called capitalist society, it tries to apply a uniform standard over the entire society, forgetting that there is so much of diversities in the society having different needs, claims and aspirations, and therefore, it leads to the suppression of diversity in the society. Now, Adorno's one of the most important concern was his concern for the human suffering. Now, Adorno's philosophy is fundamentally concerned with human suffering. It is founded upon a central moral conviction that the development of human civilization has been achieved through a systematic separation of nature and the consolidation of insidiously oppressive social and political system to which we all are exposed. So, therefore, these practices have created enormous suffering at multitudinous level for the human beings, because he believed that this development of human civilization has been built upon human repression. Now, this is a very important point which has been raised by Adorno. It has been achieved through a systematic repression of nature and the consolidation of insidiously oppressive social and political system, because the oppressive social and political system were already in existence. These, the advent of the capitalism and modernity, they actually consolidated them and used them to further their exploitative practices. So, therefore, it increased manifold the human suffering. Then he made a diagnosis of a damaged life. Now, the central tension in Adorno's diagnosis of what he termed damaged life consists in the unrelentingly critical character of his evaluation of the effects of modern society upon their inhabitants, coupled with a tentative but absolutely essential a commitment to a belief in the possibility of the elimination of unnecessary suffering. So, here we see that on the one hand he is actually talking about or concerned about the damaged life, and on the other hand he is absolutely committed or he has a belief in the emancipation of the sufferings of modern life. So, basically when he is talking about the so called concept of damaged life, he is talking about the various insidious effects of modern society upon the individuals. And actually we have been studying about all those effects at multifarious lectures and platforms. So, we know that what are the effects of modern society amongst the individual beings. But he also says that there is a absolutely essential commitment to a belief in the possibility of the elimination of unnecessary suffering which the common individuals have to bear in their everyday life. Now, how Adorno has been influenced by Hegel and what was his take on Hegel's political philosophy. So, Hegel posited the existence of some ultimately constitutive ground of human reality in the metaphysical form of geist or spirit. Adorno did not accept this viewpoint. Hegel ultimately viewed reality as a manifestation of some a priori form of consciousness analogous to God. So, when Hegel was interpreting reality, he was actually interpreting it or viewing it as a manifestation of some a priori form of consciousness which is analogous to God, which is equivalent to God. So, this understanding of human reality in the metaphysical form of geist or spirit was not acceptable, because we know that Adorno did not believe in the existence of a transcendental subject. So, he cannot also believe in the existence of a transcendental spirit which is analogous to God. He conceived that the material reality emanates from consciousness. So, from our consciousness the material reality actually comes into being. And also Adorno disagreed by arguing that any recourse to some a priori ultimately a historical basis to reality was itself best seen as conditioned by material forces and conditions. So, ultimately he actually denounced the Hegel's idea of a priori principle, and on the other he argued that we cannot have a historical basis to understanding or to reality, and because our reality is very much understood or it is linked with the various material forces and conditions. So, without understanding you can say the rootedness of the reality in the social, economic and political structure, we can have only a half-hearted understanding of reality which may not be true. Then let us study some of the influence of Nietzsche. Of all the critical theories, the writings of Nietzsche have exerted the most important influence upon Adorno. Nietzsche's account of autonomy exercised an important and consistent influence upon Adorno's own understanding of autonomy. So, he was very much concerned and he was very pertinent about the autonomy of the individual and how that autonomy of the individual has been violated or has been snatched away by the capitalist society. We find that this notion he has got or he has been inspired by the ideas of autonomy of Nietzsche. Now, the specific understanding which Adorno developed in respect of the relationship between reason and domination owed much to Nietzsche. So, you can see that he was very much critical of the reason of the Enlightenment tradition and how that reason has led to domination and how that domination has led to finally the control of human autonomy is very well known, and Nietzsche has also given an account of the domination in such terms. Now, Adorno came to share some of the essential features of this basically instrumental account of reason. Now, the book he wrote with Max Horkheimer which is titled The Dialectic of Enlightenment, is the foremost text of critical theory which grapples with precisely this account of reason. So, when he is talking about reason, he is talking of reason as domination or the instrumental rationality which has subsumed the older version of reason, and how this has been so much, it has a deleterious effect on the autonomy of the individual. So, this text, which is known as Dialectic of Enlightenment, is actually grapples with this account of reason and how it has led to so much of deleterious effects on the individual. Now, if we try to understand what Adorno meant by identity thinking, then we know that we have already discussed in some brief about the meaning of identity thinking. And we must remember that this propagation of identity thinking is linked to power and domination. Ultimately, this abstract thinking, which tries to destroy all diversities or diverse viewpoints, is ultimately aimed at exercising power and domination. And a perfect example of identity thinking would be those forms of reasoning found within bureaucracies, where individual human beings are assembled within different classes or categories. So, you can see that the individual distinctiveness is lost, and whenever we are in general talking about bureaucracy, we have in our mind a notion of an impersonal organization, having a rigid hierarchical structure, having the problems of red tapeism, delay, and so many other features which instantly comes to our mind. So, in the bureaucracy, what we see that the individuals are classified, they are hierarchically organized, and there is a division of labor in the bureaucracy, where the individuals are identified by certain classes or by some job, name or categories. And the bureaucracy can thus only be said to know any specific individual as an exemplar of the wider category to which the individual has been assigned. So, individual is known by the category or the class to which he belongs rather than the individual because of his or her own uniqueness or identity. So, this identity thinking, where you make a identity in terms of larger categories, thereby forgetting or ignoring the individual distinctiveness, is what has been a very important source of power and an exercise of domination. Now, Adorno condemns identity thinking as a systematically and also necessarily misrepresenting reality by means of the subsumption of specific phenomena under general, more abstract classificatory headings within which the phenomenal world is cognitively assembled. So, you can see that how this process of identity thinking, it helps in actually ignorance, or you can say hiding of the various types of the, you can say, the distinctiveness and the uniqueness of the individuals or categories or things, and it leads to in a way a misrepresentation of reality, because we are not making a picturization of reality as it should be. We are trying to interpret the reality or the object world through our senses in a particular manner in which we want. So, therefore, it leads to the subduing of specific phenomena under general, more abstract classificatory headings. So, the uniqueness of the phenomena is lost, and you can see that in this way the entire phenomena or the phenomenal world is understood and it is cognitively organized or assembled. Now, Adorno was also a critique of nihilism. Now, we know that he has actually talked about the problem of nihilism with respect to loss of moral values or morality in the society. Now, Adorno argues that modern society is no longer guided by moral values or the moral truths, which are very essential for maintaining the society. What has replaced morality as the integrating cement of social life are instrumental reasoning and exposure of everyone here to the capitalist market. So, you can see that now with the advent of capitalism, the so called market economy and the rules of market are actually our guiding principles of life. Now, we are guided more by the money and the market economy and the values of capitalism rather than the moral principles which used to earlier guide our life and that made our life virtuous in nature. Now, unfortunately, the so called morality has been replaced by instrumental reasoning, and we know that instrumental reasoning is nothing but use of reason to exercise power or to justify the exercise of power in the society. So, therefore, the so called instrumental reasoning have become the cementing force of our life rather than the morality, which is such an unfortunate development for human society. So, therefore, according to Adorno, the modern capitalist society are fundamentally characterized by the process of nihilism, where there is absence of morality, where there is absence of any standards. It is a nihilist in character because the need for moral values and the so called morally good life have been abandoned, and instead people have accepted instrumental reasoning and capitalism. So, all the morality and the so called importance of leading a moral life have been abandoned under the influence of capitalism and under the influence of so called instrumental rationality, and therefore, it has led to the process of nihilism. Adorno argues that under nihilistic conditions, morality has become a function or tool of power. So, when everywhere there is nothingness and there is so called absence of any morality, then morality itself becomes a tool of power. So, instead of guiding our relations and human conduct, now it is being used or it can be used as a function or tool of power, which is another important effect of the absence of morality in the society. So, now we come to the critique of the culture industry. Now, Adorno felt that the entertainment industry of the modern society is just as mechanical, formulaic and dominating as a workplace. So, he makes a very interesting analogy between the entertainment industry and the so called workforce. If you remember, Marx had actually categorized or he has picturized the workforce as highly mechanistic and atomistic in nature, where the individuals have been reduced to atoms and they have been reduced to a cog in the machine. They are doing the same task again and again, which makes a job so much of monotonous, and also it is a type of repetition. So, we see that the workplace has become mechanical, it is guided by certain strict rules and regulations, and it is dominated and controlled by some boss who is sitting at a distant place. The same type of principles are also getting visible in the field of culture, in the field of entertainment industry, where we find that there also the style of working is highly mechanical in nature. It is also based on certain formula, and this you can easily see the type of films which are coming out in the Hollywood or in the Bollywood, and also the type of serials which are being broadcasted by the various media. They all are based on certain common formulas which are repeated again and again. So, when you sit for watching a film, so before the film ends, you know the conclusions of the film because they are based on the same formula. So, Adorno has rightly said that the entertainment industry is based on certain mechanical, formulaic, and it is also a means of domination. It is a means of propagating, or you can say it is a means for inculcating certain values and ideas in our mind, so that we can become more conformist to the capitalist ideals and values or standards and practices. He argued that humans in modern society are programmed at work and in their leisure also, and though they seek to escape the monotony of their workplace, they are merely changing to another piece of the machine from producer to consumer. So, such an unfortunate scenario has been projected and very rightly projected by Adorno, because if you look around us, you will find that you can find lots of similarities between what Adorno has said and what is happening in reality. Because we are programmed at work means we have been dictated by some agency or by the values of the capitalist system or by our organization to do certain type of work in a certain way. And most of the time when our work has been so much of digital in nature, so we are working on a machine most of the time. And even in our leisure, we are also programmed to do or to enjoy our free time in a certain way. So, Adorno is saying that when we seek to escape the monotony of the workplace, we are actually not escaping the monotony, because we are only changing one machine to another machine. Maybe we are shifting from the computer to our mobile to watch some games or to watch some serials or program. So, thereby we are actually making a shift from our role as producer to our role as consumer. So, earlier we were in the role of producer, we were producing something, now we are in the role of consumer. So, in our free time we are consuming something. So, therefore, it is merely the shift in machine, it is not the shift of, or it is not the removal of the monotony from which we want to escape. So, therefore, there is no chance of becoming free individuals who can take part in the creation of society, whether at work or play. Now, this is a very, very important point, because whether at workplace or even at the leisure time, because the leisure time is considered very important by Adorno, because he believed that it was the place or time when one can be very creative and use that time for their own development and do certain work which may be of benefit to the society. But unfortunately, even during the leisure time, we have been programmed to watch those programs, or we have been programmed to do those work which are in no way so called creative in nature. So, we are not free in the sense, because we are not able to develop or work according to our human essence. And the power of the culture industry's ideology is such that conformity has replaced consciousness. This is a absolutely important statement and very significant statement made by Adorno, that conformity has replaced our consciousness, because consciousness helps us in understanding and becoming alert and sensitive to what is happening around us. Consciousness also helps us in being alert to various forms of injustices and wrongdoings in the society. And also consciousness provides us the strength to raise questions, and it also provides us the opportunity to raise voices against the government. But if there is absence of consciousness, then what happens? It leads to the rise of conformist behavior, and conformist behavior actually helps us to conform to the system rather than to change and challenge the system. I think this is one of the most serious problem which has affected our modern society. So, at the end I come to the conclusion that Adorno's philosophical writings have had a significant and lasting effect upon the development of subsequent generations of critical theorists and other philosophers. We know that he had actually written so extensively, and his writing had a very significant effect on the development of the critical theory which belonged to the Frankfurt school, and so many generations of critical theorists and thinkers, they have benefited from his writings and thought. Habermas argued that Adorno overestimates the extent to which reason has been instrumentalized within modern complex society. So, you can say it is a type of criticism, because he argues that he has given so much of importance to instrumentality, and I think it is an overestimation as per Habermas. For Habermas, instrumental reasoning is only one of a number of forms of reasoning identifiable within such societies. So, it is also a form of exploitation, but it is not the only form, because there are other forms of reasoning which are identifiable within such societies. Instrumental reasoning therefore is nowhere near as extensive, as all encompassing as Adorno and Horkheimer actually presented it as being in the dialectic of enlightenment. So, based on this work we can say, because actually this work centered around the critique of enlightenment and instrumental rationality. So, therefore, it is sometimes argued that it is an overemphasis on the instrumental rationality, but at the last I would like to say that in spite of all these criticisms, the teachings of Adorno and the writings of Adorno had a very strong influence on the Frankfurt school and on the subsequent scholars and thinkers who have greatly benefited from his writings. So, with this I come to the end of this lecture. Hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you very much.